this episode, we are going to get a little evil with our 80s kids books. So, stick around. Dorks and Dorkettes, and welcome to It Came From My Side of the Laundry Room. My name's Rob, and in this episode, I'm hoping we can do another dramatic reading of an 80s kids book. This time, it's evil, like I said. It is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, The Treasure of Time, released by Marvel Books in 1983. So it's an awesome crossover between Marvel Comics, their book division, and Dungeons & Dragons, who, at this time, had a toy line being produced by LGN and an awesome cartoon on the airwaves produced by Marvel. So anyway, without further ado, let's get to the drama. Okay, folks, here we go. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, The Treasure of Time. Published by Marvel Books with TSR. God, I love seeing that logo. Anyway, let's take a look inside. The Treasure of Time. Beautiful artwork. I mean, stunning. And I love this framing. I mean, that is... expertly done. It says here the art is by Marie Severin, and I'm not really familiar with the name. I might be familiar with the artwork. I'll have to do some, digging to see what other stuff they've done, and because I'm a huge fan. I mean, I love this book. I've had this book for a few years, and I've never sat down and read it, so we will be reading it together in a very dramatic way and enjoying the artwork. So let's go. A long time ago, in the time of magic and legend, there lived an evil sorcerer named Kellic. Kellic had studied evil magic for many years, and his powers were great. But Kellic was not satisfied. He wanted more power. He wanted to defeat all the good in the world. One day, Kellic used his crystal ball to spy on Charmé. Charmé was a powerful magic user too, but she used her magic for good. Kellic watched as Charmé studied a magic scroll. The scroll told about a magical treasure, the Treasure of Time. The Treasure of Time... The Treasure of Time, I must have it, Kellic exclaimed. With the Treasure of Time, my powers will be the greatest. No one will be able to defeat me. So Kellic plotted to steal the scroll from Charmé and find the treasure for himself. Oh man, that's beautiful. I will turn myself into a bluebird and fly to Charmé's window, Kellic said. He uttered a magic word, and spiraling colored lights surrounded him. In an instant, the evil sorcerer was changed into a beautiful bird. Oh, look, a beautiful bird, exclaimed Charmé as the bluebird fluttered into her chamber. Have you come to visit me on this cold day? I'll get you some bread to eat. As soon as Charmé turned her back, Kellic changed himself back into his real identity. Then, staring at the startled Charmé, he put a charm on her. You are under my power now, Kellic told her. This charm will make you believe that I am your dearest friend. Kellic laughed a dry and scary laugh. Why, Kellic, how nice to see you, Charmé said with a warm smile. Why do you visit me today? She was completely under his spell. Here, let me pull this camera up. I apologize for that. You have something that I need, my dear Charmé, said Kellic. Give me the scroll that tells of the treasure of time. Kellic, no, Charmé pleaded. The ancients have said that no one should disturb the treasure of time. I am not afraid. Give it to me, now! Kellic's fierce glance held Charmé like a magnet. Reluctantly, she handed him the scroll. The treasure of time will soon be mine, Kellic exclaimed. He could barely contain his joy as he walked down the path away from Charmé's dwelling. He didn't notice a fierce little fighter hiding behind a wall. It was Elkhorn, a fighter dwarf who hated Kellic and his evil. What are you doing here, you vile serpent? Elkhorn cried out, his dagger poised, ready to attack. Suddenly, a voice called down from the chamber above. No, Elkhorn, don't! It was Charmé, still under Kellic's spell. No harm must come to my friend Kellic, she cried. Elkhorn could not believe his ears. He stormed off towards town, furious that he had been denied the pleasure of fighting the evil sorcerer. What an awesome-looking dwarf. I love Elkhorn figure. Never had one, always wanted one. Later that day, Elkhorn sought out Strongheart. Strongheart was the greatest warrior in the land. He was the leader of the forces of good. Wait until Strongheart... Sorry about that. Wait until Strongheart hears what Charmé said to me, Elkhorn thought. He will certainly be as angry as I am. But when Strongheart heard the dwarf's story, it was not anger he felt, but worry. Charmé must be under a spell, Strongheart told his companion. She would never protect Kellic for any other reason. We must go at once. One look at Charmé and Strongheart knew he was right. There's evil magic at work here, he said, but what does Kellic want? Strongheart realized that Charmé would tell him nothing. He turned to leave, but then he had an idea. He saw a magic mirror that Charmé sometimes used. Perhaps this mirror will show me what Kellic is plotting, he said. Oh, I'm going to sound a little evil with that. Sorry about that. At first, the image was dim, but as the magic became stronger, the picture grew clearer. Strongheart saw Kellic in the mirror. In Kellic's hand was the magic scroll that he had taken from Charmé. The treasure of time? That's what he's after? Exclaimed Strongheart. Elkhorn, we must stop him! We must get the treasure before Kellic uses its power for evil! As Strongheart watched Kellic, Kellic was also watching him. With him stood the assassin Zarek. Kellic turned away from his crystal ball to talk to Zarek. So Strongheart thinks he can get to the treasure before me, Kellic said, his voice filled with hatred. You won't allow that to happen, now will you? Zarek vowed his obedience. Then he set off to make a trap in the forest for Strongheart and Elkhorn. Using the magic mirror as a guide, Strongheart discovered that the treasure of time was hidden in the ruins of an ancient castle on the other side of the forest. He and his companion had not gone far when Strongheart suddenly stopped. There is evil here. I can sense it, he said to Elkhorn. But there's no one here but us, Elkhorn protested. I see nothing. I hear nothing. With that, the dwarf took a few steps forward and a web of poisonous snakes dropped onto him. Help me! Elkhorn cried, slashing with his dagger at the snakes that entangled him. But Strongheart could not help him. Zarek leaped out from behind a tree and with his poison-tipped sword glinting in the light. Zarek! Strongheart called, stepping forward. Your trap was meant for two, but now you must face me, man to man. Sword clashed against sword. At first, Zarek seemed to have the better of Strongheart, but not for long. With one powerful blow from the flat of his sword, Strongheart knocked Zarek unconscious. Slash! Strongheart's sword attacked the web of snakes. A few mighty strokes and Elkhorn was free. Come, we must hurry, called Strongheart. Kellic may have already beaten us to the treasure of time. Before long, Strongheart and Elkhorn came to the ruined castle. The image in the magic mirror told them to follow a crumbling stairway down into the ruins of an underground cavern. Down, down they went. The air grew cold and damp. Soon, there was no light at all. But Elkhorn, a dwarf, could see in the dark. He led the great warrior by the hand. Those are bros. They can hold hands without thinking twice about it. Suddenly, the gloom was broken by a shaft of golden light. Strongheart and Elkhorn stood and stared in silence. For there, suspended on the golden beam of light, stood a beautiful jeweled chest, the treasure of time. We're in time, shouted Strongheart. He and his companion ran towards the treasure. Not quite, called a raspy voice from the shadows. The jeweled treasure chest disappeared as Kellic stepped forward. An illusion! Strongheart cried, realizing his mistake too late. He raised his sword to attack. That was an illusion, but my blade is real. Oops. That was Strongheart that said that. My apologies. That was an illusion, but my blade, it's real, he cried angrily. In a flash, Kellic summoned a rope to wrap around his two pursuers. Whew. They stood helpless as Kellic pointed to the real treasure chest behind them. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to destroy you two yet, said Kellic, smiling. I want you to see my moment of triumph as I open the treasure of time and become the ruler of all time and all creatures. Kellic's bony hand reached forward to open the chest. Suddenly, a giant bat flew into the cavern. Kellic started to shoo it away, but the bat changed form and became Charmé. That's a pretty cool picture. You didn't really imagine that your spell would last, did you, Kellic? She cried. I could never stay an ally of yours for long, but I will give you some friendly advice. Do not open that treasure chest. No one can control the treasure of time. No one. Too late, cried Kellic. He opened the chest. The room filled with explosions of light. Flares of red and gold swirled around the evil sorcerer. Green smoke filled the room. Bolts of blue lightning flamed around Kellic, and sparks leapt off his fingertips. Finally, the smoke cleared. The eerie lights faded. Standing before the amazed trio was a young man. Look, it's Kellic, cried Elkhorn, but he looks to be about 20 years old. Yes, indeed, it is I, grinned the young Kellic. Now, say your goodbyes, fools. I believe a nice fireball will make a lovely death for the three of you. The young Kellic pulled back his arm and prepared to throw the powerful fireball that would destroy Strongheart and his companions. "Fire!" he cried. But instead of a whirling hot mass of flame, a single spark floated through the air and landed at Strongheart's feet. Charmé was the first to speak. "I warned you not to try and control time, Kellic. You lost your old age, but with it you lost the knowledge and experience that gave you your power. You cannot hurt us now." Kellic knew that Charmé was right. He fell to his knees crying like a baby. Charmé took the magic scroll out of his hands. She and her companions left the ancient cavern, untouched by the once powerful wizard. Back in Charmé's chamber, Strongheart laughed at the memory of the mighty Kellic crying like a child. "How long will he be like that, Charmé?" asked the warrior. "Not very long," was her reply. "It'll take months, not years, for him to break the enchantment. But in the meantime, we will not have much to fear from his evil. Poor Kellic. He didn't realize that the treasure of time is time itself." The end. And what an awesome picture of Elkhorn. So, that was a dramatic reading of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons: The Treasure of Time. So, back to me. Okay, back to me. I hope you enjoyed that dramatic reading of The Treasure of Time, an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons children's book. That in itself is a tremendous rarity. I mean, you have to remember that during this period, Dungeons & Dragons and all role-playing games were under heavy scrutiny and fire. You have to remember that people thought that D&D and other role-playing game books were etched by the hand of Satan himself, and they were just there waiting to seduce America's youth. I mean, the fear-mongering of the whole satanic panic in the 80s was, I mean, now it's very laughable, but back then it was pretty darn scary because people were looking at you like you were ready to spout wings and a forked tail and horns just for playing a game or reading a magazine or reading a comic or playing with a certain toy. I mean, I'm definitely seeing a resurgence of that craziness nowadays, and yeah, that's just really unfortunate. But we are seeing tabletop role-playing games being more popular now than ever, which is awesome. Again, I hope you enjoyed that dramatic reading of this 80s kids book. Anyway, I admit that could have been better, and I will get plenty of practice because this will be a new monthly installment on the channel. Dramatic reading of 80s kids books. And I am looking forward to it because I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I'm getting an opportunity to look at a lot of these books that have either been sitting on a shelf for decades or that I have recently acquired and just haven't had the time to flip through yet. So, bonuses all around. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you got something to say, please leave a comment. I love reading them and I love getting back to everybody. And if you're new around here and you enjoyed this or any of the episodes being recommended down here, please hit subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, you will be notified whenever there's a new episode. So anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Keep being rad and stay dorky.